How is it that in an age of empires, when great European powers carved up the world with ink and steel, one small island kingdom in the vast Pacific Ocean managed to hold on to its sovereignty? This is the extraordinary story of Tonga, a nation that stands alone as a testament to resilience, diplomacy, and an unbreakable spirit. While its neighbors fell under the flags of Britain, France, Germany, and America, Tonga navigated the treacherous waters of colonialism with a deftness that continues to inspire awe. Its survival was not a matter of chance, but the result of shrewd leadership, a deep sense of cultural identity, and an unwavering belief in its own destiny. The Tongan monarchy, ancient and revered, became the anchor that held the nation steady against the rising tide of foreign influence. The Pacific Ocean, a seemingly endless expanse of blue, was once the final frontier for European explorers. They arrived with ships, guns, and a conviction that their way of life was superior, destined to be imposed upon the peoples they encountered. Island after island, from Fiji to Samoa, from Tahiti to the Solomon Islands, eventually succumbed to this pressure, becoming protectorates, colonies, or territories. Yet Tonga, an archipelago of more than 170 islands, charting its own course, remained a kingdom. This remarkable feat was not because it was overlooked or ignored. On the contrary, Tonga was a strategic prize. Its story is a powerful reminder that history is not just written by the powerful, but also by the clever, the determined, and the proud. To understand Tonga's unique journey, one must look beyond the simple narratives of colonial conquest. It is a tale woven from threads of ancient tradition, strategic alliances, and the visionary leadership of one extraordinary king. The kingdom's ability to adapt without surrendering its core identity is a lesson in statecraft. It selectively adopted elements of European culture, such as Christianity and a constitutional monarchy, turning these potential tools of subjugation into instruments of self-preservation. This delicate balancing act allowed Tonga to present itself to the world as a modern, civilized nation, all while fiercely protecting the customs and hierarchies that had defined it for centuries. It was a performance of sovereignty on a world stage, and Tonga played its part brilliantly. The legacy of this defiance is visible everywhere in Tonga today. It is in the enduring respect for the monarchy, the vibrancy of its language, and the intricate beauty of its traditional arts. While other Pacific nations have had to reclaim their identities from the ashes of colonial rule, Tonga's has remained a continuous, unbroken thread. This is not to say that its path has been without challenges. The kingdom has faced internal strife, economic pressures, and the ever-present threat of climate change. But its foundation, forged in the crucible of the colonial era, has given its people a profound sense of unity and pride. Tonga's story is not just history, it is a living, breathing example of how a small nation can stand tall in a world of giants. Long before European sails first appeared on the horizon, Tonga was already an ancient land with a rich and storied past. Its story begins around 3,000 years ago with the arrival of the Lapita people, a seafaring culture renowned for its distinctive pottery and incredible navigational skills. These intrepid explorers journeyed across vast stretches of the open ocean in magnificent double-hulled canoes, settling the islands of Polynesia. Tonga was one of their earliest destinations, and here they laid the foundations of a society that would one day become an empire. These first Tongans were masters of their environment, cultivating yams, taro, and breadfruit, and drawing sustenance from the bountiful sea. Their legacy is etched into the very landscape, a silent reminder of the kingdom's deep roots. From these early settlements, a powerful maritime empire began to emerge. Around the 10th century AD, the Tui Tonga dynasty was established, marking the beginning of a centralized political and spiritual authority that would dominate the region for centuries. The Tui Tonga, or Sacred King, held immense power, his influence extending far beyond the shores of Tonga Tapu, the main island. Through a combination of conquest, strategic marriages, and tribute, the Tongan Empire stretched its reach to parts of Fiji, Samoa, Niue, and Wallis and Futuna. It was a sophisticated society with a complex social hierarchy where chiefs and nobles governed with the blessing of the divine Tui Tonga. This was a Pacific powerhouse, a center of trade, culture, and power, long before the world outside even knew it existed. The strength of the Tonga Empire was built upon its maritime prowess. Tongan sailors were among the finest in the world. Their large canoes, known as kalia, capable of carrying over 100 warriors on long-distance voyages. These vessels were the lifeblood of the empire, connecting its scattered island territories and enforcing the Tonga's rule. They facilitated a vibrant exchange of goods, ideas, and people, creating a truly interconnected Pacific world. The empire's capital, located at Mua on Tongatapu, was a bustling hub of activity, where grand ceremonies were held and elaborate royal tombs, known as langi, were constructed. These monumental stone structures stand today as silent witnesses to the golden age of Tongan power and ingenuity. However, like all great empires, the Tonga's influence eventually began to wane. By the 15th century, internal power struggles and challenges from rival chiefdoms led to the creation of two new royal lines, the Tui Hatakalawa and later the Tui Kanakupolu. These lines took on more of the day-to-day political and administrative duties, while the Tui Tonga retained a primarily spiritual role. This division of power, though intended to stabilize the kingdom, sowed the seeds of future conflict. By the time Europeans arrived, Tonga was a complex and dynamic society, with a long history of statecraft and a deeply ingrained sense of its own importance. It was this ancient legacy of empire that would ultimately shape its response to the new and formidable challenge of colonization. The first documented European contact with Tonga occurred in 1616, when the Dutch explorers Willem Schouten and Jacob Lemaire sailed past its northern islands. But it was the celebrated British navigator, Captain James Cook, who truly brought Tonga to the attention of the Western world. Cook visited the islands 3 times between 1773 and 1777, and he was profoundly impressed by the warm reception he received. He was welcomed with elaborate feasts, intricate ceremonies, and generous hospitality, leading him to bestow upon the archipelago the now famous name, the Friendly Islands. This moniker, though well-intentioned, painted a somewhat simplistic picture of a complex society. The friendliness was genuine, but it was also a strategic display orchestrated by powerful chiefs. Captain Cook's interactions were primarily with the Tui Kanakupolu line, which was vying for greater power within the kingdom. The chiefs saw these strange visitors, with their enormous ships and fascinating metal goods, as potential allies and a source of new prestige. They showered Cook and his crew with gifts and entertained them with elaborate displays of dance and sport, all while carefully observing their customs and technology. Cook, for his part, was a keen observer, documenting Tongan culture, language, and social structures in great detail. His journals provided Europe with its first real glimpse into this sophisticated Pacific kingdom, creating an image of an idyllic paradise, a perception that would have long-lasting consequences for the islands. However, behind the veneer of friendship lay the complex realities of Tongan politics. The warm welcome extended to Cook was not without its own undercurrents. Some historical accounts suggest that certain chiefs may have plotted to seize one of Cook's ships, a plan that was ultimately abandoned. This reveals the dual nature of the Tongan response, a genuine curiosity and hospitality mixed with a pragmatic desire to gain advantage. The arrival of Europeans introduced new elements into the existing power struggles, as different factions sought to control the trade in firearms, iron tools, and other valuable foreign goods. The Friendly Islands were entering a new and uncertain era, where external forces would begin to reshape their internal dynamics. Following Cook's voyages, Tonga became a more frequent stop for whalers, traders, and beachcombers. These early visitors were a mixed blessing. They brought new trade opportunities and technologies, but they also introduced diseases to which the islanders had no immunity, as well as alcohol and firearms that would destabilize the delicate balance of power. The initial image of a peaceful paradise began to fade as Tonga became entangled in the more disruptive aspects of global commerce. The friendly welcome that had so charmed Captain Cook was slowly giving way to a more cautious and sometimes hostile stance as the kingdom began to grapple with the momentous changes that had been set in motion by these first fateful encounters. The arrival of European influence, especially missionaries, really acted as a catalyst that ignited the simmering tensions within the Tongan political landscape. In 1799, the London Missionary Society sent its first representatives, but honestly, their initial efforts were largely unsuccessful, ending in violence and failure. However, the arrival of the Wesleyan Methodists in the 1820s marked a true turning point. These missionaries were more persistent and strategic, focusing on converting influential chiefs, knowing that their followers would likely adopt the new faith as well. The introduction of Christianity created a powerful new fault line in Tongan society, pitting converts against those who still adhered to the traditional polytheistic beliefs. Pretty soon, this religious division escalated into a full-blown civil war. The conflict that engulfed Tonga for several decades was brutal and, well, truly transformative. It was a multifaceted struggle, fought not just over religion, but also for ultimate political supremacy among the competing royal lines. Chiefs armed with muskets, acquired through trade with Europeans, battled for control of land and people. The old order was crumbling, and out of all that chaos, one figure emerged as a dominant force: Taufahau, a high chief from the Tui Kanokupolu line. He was a brilliant military strategist and a charismatic leader who, in 1831, converted to Christianity and was baptized with the name George. This was a masterstroke, as it aligned him with the growing power and influence of the missionaries and their European backers. King George Tupou I, as he would become known, methodically set about unifying the islands under his rule. Using a combination of warfare, diplomacy, and his newfound Christian faith as a unifying ideology, he conquered the rival chiefdoms of Ha'apai and Vava'au. By 1845, he had consolidated his power and was formally declared the Tui Kanokupolu, effectively becoming the king of a united Tonga. He established a new capital in Nuku'alofa and embarked on a radical program of modernization. He understood that to protect Tonga from the encroaching colonial powers, he needed to remake it in a form they would recognize and respect: a modern, constitutional Christian monarchy. He sought to build a nation that was Tongan at its heart, but Western in its structure. The culmination of his efforts came with the promulgation of the Tongan Constitution in 1875. This revolutionary document, inspired by British models, formally abolished the old system of semi-serfdom, established a privy council and a legislative assembly, and guaranteed freedom and land rights for all Tongan citizens. It was a profound transformation, centralizing power in the monarchy while also laying the groundwork for a modern nation-state. King George Tupou I's long and visionary reign, which lasted until his death in 1893, was the single most important factor in Tonga's survival as an independent kingdom. He had taken a nation fractured by civil war and forged it into a unified state capable of standing on its own. As the 19th century drew to a close, the scramble for the Pacific was in full swing. Britain, France, and Germany were annexing territories across the ocean, and Tonga's independence looked increasingly fragile. The kingdom was under immense pressure, particularly from Germany, which had significant commercial interests in the region. It was clear to Tonga's leaders that isolation was no longer a viable strategy. To survive, they would need to engage in shrewd diplomacy and align themselves with a major power that could protect them from the others. This led to one of the most remarkable and pivotal moments in Tongan history: the signing of the Treaty of Friendship with Great Britain in 1900. It was a move that, quite frankly, saved the kingdom from outright colonization. The treaty was a delicate and carefully negotiated agreement. On the surface, it appeared to cede some control to Britain. Tonga became a British-protected state, meaning its foreign affairs would be handled by a British consul, who would also have veto power over financial matters. For many other nations, this would have been the first step towards becoming a full-blown colony. However, the Tongan negotiators, guided by the legacy of King George Tupou I, ensured that the treaty contained crucial provisions that preserved the kingdom's core sovereignty. Most importantly, it explicitly guaranteed the continuation of the Tongan monarchy and the line of succession. The King of Tonga remained the head of state, and Tonga continued to govern its own people. This arrangement was a masterclass in pragmatic diplomacy. Tonga's leaders recognized that they could not defy the might of the European empires directly. Instead, they chose to voluntarily enter into a relationship with the least threatening of the powers, Britain, which was more interested in strategic denial, keeping other nations out, than in direct rule. By accepting British protection, Tonga effectively shielded itself from the more aggressive colonial ambitions of Germany and France. It was a case of sacrificing a small degree of external autonomy to preserve the far more precious internal sovereignty and the integrity of the monarchy, which was the very heart of Tongan national identity. For the next 70 years, the Treaty of Friendship defined Tonga's relationship with the outside world. While the British consul held considerable influence, Tonga was never formally incorporated into the British Empire. Tongan laws, customs, and land tenure systems remained intact. The Tongan flag continued to fly, and the king continued to reign. This unique status allowed Tonga to avoid the profound cultural dislocation and loss of identity that so many other colonized peoples experienced. The treaty was not an act of submission, but a calculated act of self-preservation. It was the diplomatic shield that allowed the last remaining indigenous kingdom in the Pacific to weather the storm of colonialism and emerge with its spirit and its sovereignty unbroken. The period of the British Protectorate, from 1900 to 1970, was a time of gradual evolution for Tonga. While the kingdom maintained its internal self-government, the relationship with Britain was not always smooth. The presence of the British consul created a parallel power structure that sometimes clashed with the authority of the Tongan monarchy and government. Yet, this period also provided a stable environment for Tonga to continue its process of modernization, albeit at its own pace. The government developed its administrative capacities, established schools and hospitals, and slowly adapted its political institutions to meet the demands of the 20th century. The long and stable reign of Queen Salote Tupu III from 1918 to 1965 was particularly crucial during this era. Queen Salote was a beloved and astute monarch who became a symbol of Tongan identity both at home and abroad. She carefully navigated the relationship with Britain, asserting Tongan interests while maintaining the essential protection the treaty afforded. Her international fame grew enormously after she attended the coronation of Queen Elizabeth II in London in 1953, where she endeared herself to the world by riding in an open carriage through the pouring rain. This act of cheerful stoicism brought Tonga to global attention and reinforced its status as a unique and proud kingdom. Under her guidance, Tonga began to lay the groundwork for a future where it would once again take full control of its own destiny. As the tide of colonialism receded across the globe in the post-World War II era, the Protectorate arrangement began to seem increasingly anachronistic. A new generation of Tongan leaders, including Queen Salote's son and successor, King Taufa'ahau Tupou IV, felt that the time had come for Tonga to reclaim its full independence. The process was not one of struggle or conflict, but of careful and amicable negotiation. Britain, divesting itself of its empire, was willing to relinquish its role. The partnership that had served Tonga so well for 70 years had run its course. The kingdom was now ready to step back onto the world stage as a fully sovereign nation, confident in its ability to manage its own affairs. On June 4, 1970, the final ties of the Protectorate were severed, and Tonga celebrated its full independence. It was a moment of immense national pride, but it was also a seamless transition rather than a radical break. The monarchy, the constitution, and the government structures that had been so carefully preserved throughout the Protectorate remained in place. Tonga joined the Commonwealth of Nations and the United Nations, taking its place among the community of independent states. The long road that began with the bold vision of King George Tupou I had reached its destination. The kingdom had successfully navigated the most perilous century in its history, emerging not as a relic of the past, but as a modern, sovereign nation with its ancient identity still burning brightly. Today, the Kingdom of Tonga stands as a vibrant testament to its unique history. Its culture is a living, breathing entity, deeply rooted in traditions that have been passed down through generations. The concept of, or respect, is the cornerstone of Tongan society, governing interactions between family members, commoners and nobles, and the people and their monarch. This reverence for hierarchy and tradition is intertwined with a strong Christian faith, creating a unique cultural fusion. The Tongan language, a beautiful Polynesian tongue, is spoken everywhere, a proud symbol of national identity. In a world where so many indigenous languages are fading, Tonga's remains the vibrant heartbeat of the nation, a daily affirmation of its enduring heritage. The arts are another powerful expression of the Tongan soul. The rhythmic beat of drums and the graceful movements of the bee, a traditional group dance recognized by UNESCO as a masterpiece of the oral and intangible heritage of humanity, tell the stories of the kingdom's history and legends. Women create exquisite or decorated bark cloth and finely woven mats, which are considered treasured family heirlooms and play a central role in ceremonies like weddings and funerals. These art forms are not museum pieces. They are an integral part of daily life, connecting the present generation to their ancestors and reinforcing the social fabric of the community. They are a visual and kinetic celebration of what it means to be Tongan. However, this proud kingdom is not immune to the challenges of the 21st century. As a low-lying island nation, Tonga is on the front lines of the climate crisis, facing the existential threats of rising sea levels, coastal erosion, and increasingly powerful cyclones, like the devastating tropical cyclone Gita in 2018. Economic pressures and limited opportunities on the islands also drive significant emigration, creating a large Tongan diaspora in countries like New Zealand, Australia, and the United States. Furthermore, there is an ongoing conversation within the country about political reform and the desire for greater democracy, balancing the traditional power of the monarchy and nobles with the aspirations of the people for a more representative government. In the face of these modern pressures, Tonga draws strength from the very values that allowed it to defy colonization: resilience, unity, and an unshakable pride in its identity. The Tongan spirit, often summarized by the motto, "God and Tonga are my inheritance," remains the kingdom's greatest asset. It is a spirit of community where family and social obligations often take precedence over individual ambition. It is a spirit of defiance, born from a history of standing firm against outside influence. As Tonga navigates the complexities of the modern world, it does so with the quiet confidence of a nation that has always known its own worth. An unconquered kingdom, still charting its own course in the vast Pacific Ocean.